Assalamu alaikum, Shehzad sir, and everyone. Welcome to Islamic Study Circle weekly classes. I'm Bushra Aziz, and I'll be covering for Shokhi Barak Sahab this week. Shehzad sir, if you're ready, let's begin our class.
Just a second. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. My dear viewers, participants, I welcome you to this session of our Islam Study Circle. And as is the custom, in the first session, we shall discuss the Quran, the Hadith, and the Bible. And in the second section, inshallah, we'll discuss some of the misconceptions that prevail in the name of Islam. And other than that, inshallah, you'll be getting the chance to ask questions as well. So let me first begin with the Quranic verses which I've selected for today, and I've given them the title as God's Call. Now, you would you would agree with me, I'm sure, that when you read through the Quran, there are a number of passages which appeal to your intellect, and then there are a number of passages which also appeal to your emotions. And the powerful ones which appeal to your emotions actually induce you towards righteousness, induce you towards the hereafter, giving preference to the hereafter, not forsaking the herein or giving up your life of this world, the pleasures of this life, but giving the pleasures of the hereafter more preference to the pleasures and leisures of this worldly life. So these verses, which I'm just first going to read out before you, actually are one of the very powerful emotional passages of the Quran, in which the Almighty is actually calling out towards human beings as if he is asking them towards something. And I would say that this is one of the very, very powerful and very profound sections of the Quran. Let me read out the Arabic verses and their translation first before you, and then inshallah we'll shed some light on their meaning. So the verses go like this: Wallahu yad'u ila daris salam wa yahdi man yasha'u ila siratim mustaqim للذين أحسنوا الحسنى وزيادة ولا يرهق وجوههم قتر ولا ذلة أولئك أصحاب الجنة هم فيها خالدون والذين كسبوا السيئات جزاء سيئة بمثلها وترهقهم ذلة ما لهم من الله من عاصم كأنما أغشيت وجوههم قطع من الليل مظلما أولئك أصحاب النار هم فيها خالدون. I can tell you literally, these very, very powerful words make your hair rise at their end and also stir your soul the way they portray what God's call is. So a translation of these verses would be, and God invites you to paradise, the abode of peace. He guides according to his law whomever he wills to a straight path. Those who did good deeds shall have a good reward, and more besides. Neither blackness nor humiliation shall overcast their faces. These are the dwellers of paradise, wherein they shall abide forever. As for those who have earned evil, then the reward of evil is evil, and humiliation will cover them. No one will be able to save them from God. It will be as though patches of the night have veiled their faces. They are the dwellers of the fire, wherein they shall abide forever. So you can see how these powerful words actually portray this call of God. I'm sure if you've just gone through the translation, that'll really stir your soul and create a lot of commotion in your mind, simply because you can see how these words have their own effect and how they actually give this motivation to believers that God's call is towards paradise. God's call is towards the hereafter. God's call is not to forsake this world, but God's call is to give more preference to the hereafter. And this is how he has actually started off by saying, Wallahu yad'u ila daris salam. God invites you to paradise. God invites you to the abode of peace, which is paradise. And how does he invite you? He tells us that if people uh, adopt the straight path, the Almighty is going to guide them further. If they follow their own innate guidance, the Almighty will give them the urge to follow this guidance even more vehemently. And as the verse says, you can see some of the parts of the verse, they literally shake you, they literally jolt you, they literally are so profound. Look at the words, لِلَّذِينَ أَحْسَنُوا الْحُسْنَى وَزِيَادَةً. It says, those who did good deeds shall have a reward, and it does not stop here. The words are, and more besides. So whatever good reward that you can think of will be given to you, but not only that, you'll have even more, much more. And then there is a silence, because of course when God says that they're going to be more, then you can easily understand how and what this more could be. It's like a bonus from the Almighty. It's like something being offered as a motivation, as an inspiration to all human beings, that come forward, enter the abode of paradise, enter the abode of peace as far as you can. And for this, don't think that your life of this world is something which you have to forsake or give up. No, you have to remain in this life. You have to fight in this life. You have to contribute in this life as much as you can. You have to give your best as far as you can in this life. And whenever there is a conflict between the requisites and the demands of this life and the next world, then the preference is to be given to the next world. So it's just a question of preference. It's not a question of forsaking this world. And then see what these verses further say. They say, وَلَا يَرْهَقُ وُجُوهَهُمْ قَتَرٌ وَلَا ذِلَّةٌ, which means that those who do good deeds shall have a good reward and more besides, and neither blackness nor humiliation will overcast their faces. Of course, when this is said, this is always said in relation to a contrast. And the contrast is that whereas the dwellers of paradise, they will have faces which have lit up by the guidance of the Almighty. There will be no blackness covering their faces. On the other hand, people who enter hell, for them it will be an entirely different ball game. For them, there will be blackness. For them, there will be, as the Quranic verses themselves say. Look at the words they say. They say that as for those who have earned evil, then the reward of evil is evil, and humiliation will cover them. No one will be able to save them from God. Ma lahum min Allahi min asim. And then it says, uh, it will be as though patches of the dark night have veiled their faces. These dark night, or the reference to the words this dark night, actually is to the fact that they will be in a state of ignominy. They will be in a state of complete humiliation. They will be doomed, and this doom they will be seeing from their eyes. The very pit of hell in which they're going to enter will be something which will haunt them in a very, very profound way. And another thing, viewers, which you might have noticed, and this is a very common style of the Quran, it says, وَيَهْدِي مَن يَشَاءُ إِلَى صِرَاطٍ مُسْتَقِيمٍ, right at the beginning, which means that he guides whomsoever he wants to the straight path. And let there be no misconception, the way these words are spelled out here. They do not mean at all that it is the Almighty who actually guides whomsoever he wishes. And whomsoever he does not wish, they are not guided to the right path. No, this is not the meaning of the Quranic verse. We need to understand that the background of this Quranic verse is that basically the idolaters of Arabia, the mushrikun of Arabia, they thought that their own deities, their angels, whom they thought are the daughters of God, they will intercede for them and make them do whatever they would like to, and in this way they would sort of control God. It is here that the Almighty is saying that no, it is He who's going to guide people. No one is going to stop Him, or no one is going to influence Him in this guidance. People should not think that other deities would be able to guide them, or other deities are the ones who will affect or influence the Almighty in guiding people. No, no one can hold the hand of the Almighty. And since we know, as far as God is concerned, the greatest embodiment of God is that He is a just being. Nothing against justice can emanate from Him. So that is why, in bracket, you can see in the translation, the words are according to His law, which means people who deserve to be guided more shall be guided by Him, which in other words mean that if people they have given due regard to the innate guidance found in their own nature, in their own fitra, then the Almighty will actually increase this guidance. The Almighty will make them provide them with more guidance, and this is something which they deserve because they gave due regard to the guidance that they had in their own nature. And hence, these words should not be misconstrued to mean that guidance is something which is based on the whims of the Almighty. He can deprive people of guidance and He can just give them. No, there is a law of this guidance which is mentioned in the Quran, and that is people who are who honor the guidance which they already have in their own nature. They follow that guidance, then the Almighty provides them with more guidance. He actually guides them. He gives them the urge to follow this guidance. So there should not be any cause of concern or any misconception. And the other thing is that these verses also speak of the fact that at times there are extreme situations in which dwellers of paradise and dwellers of hell, they are actually held parallel in these verses. You see, if you can see right in the middle where the dwellers of paradise are mentioned, the words are hum fiha khalidun. They shall remain in paradise forever. And then similarly, for the dwellers of hell, we have exactly the same words being repeated, and they mean hum fiha khalidun as well. They actually, the words these are hum fiha khalidun, which means, of course, that they shall remain in hell forever. Again, as you can see, that you have to understand that these are two extreme criminals and two extreme, I would say, on the one hand, an extreme criminal, and on the other hand, an extremely pious person who is mentioned here. So The extremely good people and the extremely bad people are the ones who are going to stay in hell and heaven, respectively, or the other way around, as far as permanence is concerned. We have to understand that as far as paradise is concerned, as far as hell is concerned, as far as people who enter paradise is concerned, they will remain there forever. And for them, when it is said hum fiha khalidun, it naturally means that they're not going to come out for it. It's like a permanent abode for them. However, as far as hell is concerned, these are extreme criminals who are going to stay in hell forever. As far as people are concerned who might have atoned for their sins by passing through various punishments, they might be taken out after a certain period of time. And hence, you can clearly see when it is said that hum fiha khalidun, the words here actually refer to extreme criminals who do not deserve any concession, who do not deserve any lenience, and they are meant to stay in hell forever for the crimes that they committed and for the arrogance and haughtiness and profound disrespect that they showed for the Almighty. Viewers, now let us go to the next segment, and which is the hadith that we're going to study today. This hadith actually is a very beautiful statement which depicts our mutual relations and which actually gives us this urgent motivation to become a single, united human family in which people care for each other, in which people are like a single body. If one part of the body aches, the whole body aches. It's like feeling for everyone. It's like having this sentiment that we are not alone. We are not ourselves in this world. We have several other people around us. They are our family. So human beings and humankind is one big family. So this hadith that I've selected has been taken from the Al-Jami al-Sahih of Imam Muslim. The words are, and it's reported by Anas ibn Malik, who's a famous companion, also a personal attendant of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So it says, "An Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam قال لا تحاسدوا ولا تباغضوا ولا تقاطعوا وكونوا عباد الله إخوانا." It's such a beautiful uh, statement and advice which these words of the Prophet give. So Anas ibn Malik reported that the Prophet said, "Neither nurse mutual jealousy, nor hatred, nor break mutual relations, and become servants of God who are brothers to one another." So you can literally see that human bond, that bond of fraternity, of global friendship, of global coming together is mentioned by the Prophet. And this is not just one place where we find this message from our beloved Prophet. There are several other narratives as well, which on a very similar note tell us that first of all, forget jealousy. You must not be envious of your own brethren. If you find that some of the people near you have more qualities, they are blessed, they have several abilities, then instead of showing envy or any hatred or jealousy, pray for them and pray for the fact that also the Almighty grants you the same qualities as far as you can. So the first thing that has been mentioned here is la tahasadu. Do not show mutual jealousy. Do not nurse mutual jealousy. You see, people become jealous of one another when they think that they are devoid of a lot of things which other people have. On the contrary, my dear viewers, what we need to understand here is that there are several qualities which each one of us may have. And instead of looking at what other people have as far as qualities are concerned, one has to make a fair assessment of one of the qualities that the Almighty has blessed us with. So we have to be very noteworthy of the fact that if there are certain qualities which are found in other people, very similarly, there are so many qualities that we have. So instead of looking at what we do not have, let us count what we have. And if we start counting God's blessing on our own selves, as a verse of the Quran says, "In ta'uddu ni'matallahi la tuhsuha." However much you may try to count the blessings of God, you'll not be able to do so. So instead of looking at what other people have, let us start looking at what we have been given by the Almighty. Each individual, I always try to make this point, is a whole institution on his own self. He or she just needs to discover the inner potential which the Almighty has blessed a person with. That inner potential then needs to be enhanced. then needs to be strengthened, amplified, simply by working through it, simply by acknowledging it and going through the routine. So if we have this feeling of deprivation of a certain quality that a other person might have, we should always look at our own inner potentials, always cast a glance on our own inner potentials, and we'll find ourselves very happy individuals. Instead of being disgruntled, instead of having a negative approach, we should have this positive approach and feel this confidence, feel that we believe in ourselves, feel that we also can contribute with whatever we have. So that should not be belittled. It should not be given away. What we have is our asset. What we have is the contribution that we can make through that asset. And then look at the second thing, which has been actually mentioned right after that, and that is wala tabaghazu, which is actually the same thing mentioned in another way. It says, do not be hateful of each other. Do not hate each other. And it is often the fact that it is because of this jealousy, enviousness, and of course, there are other areas in which you find other people being very, very hateful of the fact that you do not like other people to prosper. You do not like other people to have these good qualities. So here, this hatred is in a specific context. It's not concerned, or it's not the general hate that we think of. It means that the hate, which is a result of that jealousy, which actually makes us venomous, which makes that malice really works inside us. Now, the Quran say, the Hadith says, "La tabaghazu." Do not be mutually hateful of each other. Acknowledge the good points of each other. Always look at the qualities of each other. Always think that the other person has these good points. It's not just we who have been blessed by the Almighty. The Almighty has blessed other people as well. And of course, when you hate people, at times your hatred exceeds the limits, and you plot for them, you against them, you start plotting. It's not just a mention of the fact that you hate them in their hearts. At times this hatred takes an expression, a practical expression, by actually planting something in the minds of other people against such people. So what you do is that this hatred crosses limits, and it makes you do even more bad things. You're not just feeling hate in your own heart. What you're doing is that you are transferring that hate in other people's mind as well. You're trying to belittle that person. You're trying that person does not succeed in life at all. So the Prophet has stopped us from this behavior. And then look what the Prophet has said. "Wala taqataru." And it's an extremely important thing which the Prophet has said, that do not break mutual relations. Do not break mutual relations. My dear viewers, this is such an important advice, and we, in our own families, in our own close circles, we find relations broken. We find people hating each other so much that they would not like to meet other people. They would not like to face other people, or what to speak of greeting them or saying salam to them. No, such is this hate, such is this venom that we develop for our own brethren, that we break our relations. And we know from another narrative of the Prophet that the Prophet has stopped us from severing these relations. And he says that if something bad has happened, 3 days should not pass over it. And before 3 days end, you should go back and try to reconcile. And even if you cannot become very good friends, at least you should greet each other. At least whenever you meet, you have this feeling that you're meeting another person. You should not boycott that person. You should not live in isolation. And we should always remember that breaking relationships is like breaking the line of communication. It is like considering ourselves to be superior. It's like making ourselves more egoistic. And therefore, we have to realize that this is a human weakness. And then finally, viewers, we have to see what these beautiful words or these beautiful hadith ends on. It says, وَكُونُوا عِبَادُ اللَّهِ إِخْوَانًا. Become servants of God who are brothers to one another. So this hadith ends on this beautiful advice of brotherhood, universal brotherhood. So since all of us are God's family, so the verse, this hadith ends on this note, that become brothers to each other. Your universal brotherhood is what the Almighty wants us to indulge in. Instead of making false boundaries, instead of thinking ourselves to be superior from others, we need to realize that all of us have been created by the Almighty. We need to realize that we have been created by a single pair of mother and father. Adam and Eve are the progenitors of all of us. So there is no cause for any discrimination. We have to behave as if we are brothers to each other. Of course, when we say brothers, it means that we have to behave as a family. What do brothers do for each other? You can fall back on a brother. You can confide in a brother. You can count on his support. You can you can really pour your heart out in front of your brother. Whatever feelings that you develop, the sorrow that you have, you can share your sorrow, you can share your joy. So, in every sense of the word, we have to become brothers to each other. We have to become one fraternity. So, mankind is like a single fraternity in which we have this feeling of global brotherhood. We have this feeling of universal brotherhood. And I would say that this is the crux of everything, that if we start thinking of every single human being on this planet Earth as someone who is related to us in that bond, that human bond, in which we are the descendants of the same mother and father, then we'll have this feeling that even if a person is thousands and thousands of miles away from us, but our feelings for that brother, if they come to our notice, for example, if he is in some distress, if he is in some worry, or a mutual or a big national calamity has struck somewhere, then our natural response should be that our own brothers have been affected, our own sisters have been affected, and hence it should be a cause of bother, a cause of concern, a cause of sympathy that should arise in us. So, all in all, this is an absolutely gem of a narrative in which these common social issues have been discussed. And I do hope and pray that all of us are able to follow the advice which has been given in this narrative. Now, let us move on to the third part of our session, and this is the Bible verse of the day. And I have chosen the Psalm 9 and verse number 9. And you can see the title that I've actually taken out, chosen for this is that God is our shelter. So the verse reads, "The Lord will be a high tower for those who are crushed down, a high tower in times of trouble." So it's like saying that people who are under stress, people who are going through rough times in their life, people who are anxious, people who have a lot of trials and tribulations waiting for them. We are under a constant situation in which we are being tried by the Almighty. At times, troubles come one after the other. At times, they come in series. At times, they come in clusters, and there is no break. And in these circumstances, look what this verse says: the Lord will be a high tower for those who are crushed down. So people who are emotionally, they are totally, they've lost their daily routines. They have become disturbed individuals. For them, this is glad tiding which has been given, that He is a high tower in times of trouble. Of course, this is a symbolic way, a metaphorical way in telling us that whenever we are in a state of bother, whenever we are in a spot of bother, we have to turn to no one other than the Almighty. We need not go to any other person, no peer, no person who is our great shelter than God Himself. So we have to adhere ourselves, we have to attach ourselves to the Almighty. And the best way to attach ourselves to the Almighty is to read His books. And when I say books, I refer to the Old Testament, to the New Testament, and the final testament, which is the Quran. We have to attach ourselves to the Almighty by reading through His words. This is how He has communicated to us. And when God communicates something to us, He always gives us this shelter, this feeling that He is around us. We can experience God. Of course, we cannot see Him, but my dear participants, we can feel His presence if we work in a way, if we lead our lives in a way that we actually would like to please the Almighty, or we actually are leading a life in which we might be going through a lot of bothers, a lot of worries, but then again we have that peace of mind. We are at ease in our hearts because we know that this is a part of our life. We have to go through these bothers, and this is a way to bring us closer to God. All of us know that whenever we are worried, we come close to God. All of us know that when we are in a state of botheration, the best shelter that we can find, the solace that we can find, the comfort that we can find is none other than the Almighty. Look at the prostration, that prostration done in stress, the prostration done in worry, the sajda. Whenever we feel that discomfort in our hearts, whenever we feel low, what is recommended is that we just pick up a prayer mat and just prostrate before the Almighty and start talking to Him. And I can tell you out of experience and out of experience of many other people that talking to God when you're in stress, talking to God in your own anxiety, is a huge way in which you can find relief. And the biggest relief that you can find is when you talk to God in a state of prostration, when you are before Him. Your highest point, which is your forehead, is lying down before the Almighty. So you have to understand this, that in this case, it is the life hereafter which is being stressed. That if you have this feeling that God is with you, that is surely going to be something which is going to egg you on, and you will have this inspiration in you. You'll feel that you would like to meet God one day, but before you meet God, you experience Him in this world. And let us experience Him in this world by thanking Him, by talking to Him, by doing what He pleases, and then finding that solace and comfort in His company, and really getting overjoyed and very, very comforting in the way He deals with us, because we know the manner in which the Almighty deals with us is something in which He trusts us, He tries us, He rewards us, He answers our prayers. Look back in our life. There's so many incidents which tell us that there were instances in which we needed Him and we found Him. There were instances in which we asked for help and we got that help. So don't always think that there were those bad, evil days which have always been there. No, there have been good days in our lives as well before. We only forget them. So remember the good days that we had in the past. They can come again, and they are a means of comfort. And last but not the least, you also find comfort, as the Quran says, through the prayer, through namaz. So whenever you feel uncomfortable, whenever you feel bad in the heart, just pick up the prayer mat, just as you do prostration, offer some rakats, some nafil rakats before the Almighty, and you'll find that your heart is now become at ease. The problem or the bother might not go away, but it will be easier for you to combat that problem and bother. So with these words, we come to an end to the first part of our session. And if you have any questions, then please, you can pose the questions now. Otherwise, we'll continue with the second part of our session.
I don't think Shehzad, if anyone has any questions. I don't see any hands raised.
Okay.
We can proceed with the next.
Okay, so let's move on to the next part of our session. And of course, as you see, that the season that we are drawing towards the spiritual season, I would say, is the season of Hajj, is the season of animal sacrifice that we do, the non-pilgrims do in their own countries. So I'd like to speak about some of the misconceptions which have arisen because of these issues, and because of the fact that we are now about to enter the month of Zul Hajj. So the first thing that we need to understand is that the first 9 days of Zul Hajj, they are immensely blessed by the Almighty. So because of the fact that Zul Hajj is the month of the Hajj, so we know that these days carry a lot of significance, and any good deed done on these days carries a lot of reward. And so therefore, if we fast, or if we pray more, or if we do more charitable deeds, or we are extra kind to other people, then these are surely more rewarding days than any other. So as far as this reward is concerned, my dear viewers, do understand that the Almighty has given us these sort of bonus days in various parts of the year in which you can gain extra reward and extra benefit from the Almighty. And these are one of those days. So first, we need to understand that Hajj in itself symbolizes a very powerful and a very profound practice, and that is, it symbolizes our war against Satan. It symbolizes our jihad, our intense battle against Satan. And you can clearly see that, like an army, which is actually attired in a particular style. It moves about in various camps, and then ultimately and finally it pelts stones at certain columns, symbolizing them as if they are Satan, and throwing stones in them as if telling them that although this is a symbolic shower or a symbolic burst that they are facing, but when they go back in life, when they go back in their own routine, they will pelt those Satans that come their way, those evil desires that come their way, those evil lurements that come their way in the same manner. So you can clearly see that the biggest thing which is symbolized in this beautiful journey is the fact that you are fighting, you are symbolizing your fight against Satan. You are symbolizing your war against Satan, and you are actually going through this rehearsal that once you go back to your own lives, this war against Satan is something which you had actually enacted, so to speak, during Hajj. And now you have the same duty when you come back in life, that you have to pelt the desire, you have to pelt your own desires with those stones so that they don't come near you. So this is how Hajj beautifully symbolizes our war against Satan. Now, as far as these initial 9 days of Zulhajj are concerned, there is a fair amount of misconception, and one of these misconceptions is that as if we have been asked to fast in all these days. No, this is not the case. Of course, if we do the fast in all these days, this is something which is recommended. But as far as the Prophet himself was concerned, he only fasted on the 9th of Zulhajj. So if you can do it on the 9th, well and good. If you can do it on more than one day, it's of course an optional act. But the fact is, as far as the Prophet himself is concerned, he fasted on the 9th of Zulhajj. And then, my dear viewers, there is another thing that we do, and that is that people who offer animal sacrifice, for them it is recommended, that it's just recommended, it's not, of course, an obligation. It is recommended that they do not cut their hair and do not cut their nails for those 9 days, because this is an etiquette of animal sacrifice. When you intend to sacrifice an animal for the Almighty, you are actually dedicating yourself to the cause of the Almighty, and the etiquette of this is, and the mannerism of this is, that you do not cut your nails and you do not shave your head in any way, or cut your hair in any way. And as I said, it's basically an etiquette for those people who would like to carry on the ritual of animal sacrifice. Although it's not an obligation, but as I said, it is something of a recommended nature. So this has to be realized, that these days of Zulhajj have this special significance, and it's not that we have to be only good in these days. We have to be good all the time as far as we can. These are days in which we can earn extra reward. These are days which can give us bonuses, the way we have bonuses in our own lives. So let's be more kind to people. Let's be more caring towards people. Let's be more truthful in these days. When we say more truthful, it does not mean that we should not be truthful in other days. The fact is that this is sort of a inspiration and a motivation for us, that it's just like a workshop that we should go through, so that in other days also we should follow the same routine. But as I said, it's like a workshop in which when you follow something in a routine, it becomes easier for you to follow the same routine in other days as well. So whatever good that we can do in these days is also to be done. And I'd also like to clarify this, which I also clarified the last time we met, but because of the fact that this is a very deeply rooted misconception, and that is that animal sacrifice on Eid day is something which is regarded to be an obligation. No, this is not so. As far as animal sacrifice is concerned, it's a purely optional act of worship, a purely optional ritual of worship, although it has immense significance, it has tremendous significance, but it is not obligatory. So if a person wants to do so, of course, he should do so. But if for any reason it's not possible for him, it could be several reasons, then it is not that he is giving up an obligation. And I've also referred to this earlier on, and I'd like to repeat the same thing again, because again, this is something which needs to be discussed more and more. It needs to be revised more and more, and that is that animal sacrifice in itself symbolizes a certain thing. It's a concept that it symbolizes. It's not something in itself, it's not something per se that we need to understand. So it stands for something. And animal sacrifice actually stands for this fact that you give this pledge to the Almighty when you sacrifice an animal, that today you're sacrificing this animal just to tell the Almighty, to make this solemn commitment to the Almighty that if tomorrow our own life is needed, we will offer that. So basically, it's a symbolic representation of this commitment. As far as the meat is concerned, you can use that meat yourself, you can use it, you can send it to your friends, you can distribute it among the people who need it. It's entirely a different thing. It's not actually intended that this meat be distributed to the poor, as people generally think that the purpose of animal sacrifice is to distribute the meat that they get. No, that is not the case. That's just a byproduct. So that meat can be used in any way. The real thing which animal sacrifice stands for is a very profound concept, as I said. It's the concept in which you present yourself before the Almighty. And of course, you're not presenting yourself. In substitute, you're actually sacrificing that animal, shedding his blood, and telling the Almighty that tomorrow, if my blood is needed for the cause of truth, for the cause of justice, for the cause of any high moral value, I'll not withhold myself. So if this philosophy of animal sacrifice is kept in mind, I can clearly see, I can clearly underscore the fact that if this philosophy and this reasoning is communicated to people who have lost faith or they have lost interest in animal sacrifice, I do think that they will feel revived, a revival of this interest, especially the next generation. They have to be told that the biggest thing is to sacrifice one's life for a huge cause, for a big cause, like, for example, the cause of justice, the cause of truth. And these opportunities may not come in our own lives. So what we do is that we actually present ourselves, we present an animal in place of our own self and tell the Almighty that we are ready whenever it is required. And the second thing, especially in the case of Eid al-Azha, that we need to understand is that the sacrifice which Abraham ﷺ did in his own times, or intended to do of his son Ishmael, is also symbolized, is also actually commemorated, I would say. So this commemoration has been made on that day. And so if you can ask that, why is it that the particular day has been fixed? So the day has been fixed in order to commemorate the great sacrifice which the great prophet attempted in his own times. But as far as his philosophy is concerned, its underlying reasoning is concerned, it is that you're actually presenting a substitute in your own place and giving this commitment and pledge to the Almighty. So with these words, I do come to an end to this session, and I'd be glad to answer any questions that you might have had.
The first question is from Sophia.
Could you speak a little louder, please?
Saleem, Dr. Shehzad, my question is, one is that the annual sacrifice, I just want to confirm it can be one per family, not one per earning person as is generally understood in Pakistan.
Right. So the answer is yes, it can be one per family. It could be any number that you would like. Because you see, once a ritual goes to its optional situation in which it is an optional act of worship, so that would mean that a single family can do one, a single family can do two, or it could be any number, and it could be no number as well. Because as I said, it's not something which is of an obligation. However, it's highly recommended, and it also has a tremendous significance. And one should, of course, realize the fact that this significance is a symbolic significance in nature. It gets transferred. But this misconception has to be done away with, that every earning member is obligated to offer animal sacrifice. This is not the case. This is the Hanafi understanding, as I would say. And the people of India and Pakistan, since they are basically followers of Imam Abu Hanifa, that is why they think that every earning member is liable for animal sacrifice. Our own research in this regard is that if you view the practice of the Prophet himself, it's basically an optional act of worship, although highly recommended, and hence the number of animals that you would like to sacrifice per family, per person is entirely on your roof. For example, I could be so motivated I would have liked to sacrifice just more than one animal. That's entirely my choice, and I could be someone who would think that I could use the money for other purposes as well, and I would go for a single sacrifice or a single animal for the whole family, or maybe two families. So it is all how you view this.
Uh, Thank you, Dr. Shehzad, because I have seen families in Pakistan who are not very well off, but they will struggle that if they have there are three members, or each one must do the sacrifice. So thank you for clarifying this. My second question is that we all Muslims go for Hajj and Umrah, and we and most of the time you will see that there are people from Indonesia, Malaysia, Pakistan, Middle East, um, and they the thing that worries and puzzles me is that we go for Hajj, but then there is so much corruption in the Muslim countries. If you see in Indonesia, if you see in Malaysia, Gandhi Saab lives in Malaysia, and he would be able to tell us something about the ex-Prime Minister Najib, how corrupt he has been, and in Pakistan. So compared to the Western countries, so where has Islam gone when we come back from all these religious things we do? Why is it we don't practice it in our real lives?
Well, actually, this is something of a huge dilemma, I would say, and also a very shameful state of affairs. That as far as practicing good deeds are concerned, as far as speaking the truth is concerned, I think just one thing, just one small thing, you have to speak the truth come what may. And this small act of truth, this small act of kindness leads to so many other things that you can see that even that is not honored. So speaking the truth has now become virtually an unknown thing. People lie, they take pride in lying. So this is, of course, very unfortunate. But then you see, at the same time, I would say that instead of thinking of the society, let's start thinking of our own selves. Don't we lie? Don't we become unjust? Don't we become selfish? So it's easy to criticize others. It's extremely difficult to find the fault in our own selves and to rectify it. So I would say that one of the ways in going about these things is that let's start this change. Let's start becoming a society in which it a society which is sensitive towards these moral values. And the best place to start is with our own selves. So why should we worry more about others? We have to worry about our own selves. Let's put our own selves into this bother that from today onwards, we will not lie, we will not cheat, we will not say something which is going to hurt other people. I can assure you that it's an extremely difficult thing. If you make this commitment today, we'll break it even more vehemently tomorrow because human beings, it becomes very difficult for them to come out of their habits. So I would say that it's very distressing. I do understand that when we see at Muslim societies, they are in a very bad shape as far as practicing good deeds are concerned. But then the way out is to analyze what bad things that we are doing in our own lives and how we can rectify our own lives and how we can actually influence people in our own circle, people who live around us, our children, our spouses, our parents, our siblings. So, starting with our own selves, putting our foot down, and making this effort that I am not going to do these things that I find in the society. I think that is the approach that I would call the positive approach, in which instead of thinking negatively of other people, we have to start somewhere, and that somewhere is in our own selves. And the other thing that I'd like to put before you is the fact that people often think that Western countries or people living in the Western countries, they are more Islamic, and therefore they deserve this more praise. And it's like losing Islam in Muslim societies and discovering Islam in non-Muslim societies. I do take exception to this statement and to this principle, and I think that people forget that people living in the Western society, especially in the United States, the UK, Australia, we must not forget that they are the ummah of a very supreme prophet of the Almighty, and he was Jesus. So we must not think that it's just the ummah of the Prophet Muhammad who has the right to be morally good. If other people are morally good, It's because they are also the followers of great prophets of God. So you must not think that they have taken our Islam. No, they already had it actually. They had
Thank,
these good values.
thank you, Dr. Sir. I understand. It's just that we look up to our rulers, and it just disappoints me. My last question is, do I have to pray the Sunnah in all the prayers? Or if I just pray the Farz, is that enough?
Yes, as I've repeatedly answered here, that as far as the prayer is concerned, the only part for which we are liable before the Almighty is the farz part, the obligatory part. That's the obligatory part. As far as the sunnahs are concerned, whether they are muqaddar or ghair muqaddar, this again is a classification which our Hanafi scholars have made. Similarly, nafals, similarly wajibs, which of course the witr is considered to be a wajib. So there is this just two categories. There are just two categories, and in Arabic language, we say salatul maktuba and salatul tatawwu. Maktuba means farz, and tatawwu means all other prayers which are other than farz. Whether you are praying the witr, whether you're praying nafals, whether you're praying the sunnah, they are all of one category, and that is the optional category. It could be a very desirable thing, but then you are not liable to pray for it. You'll not be held accountable. You'll not be held answerable for this.
And my last question, Dr. Shehzad, is that what do you say when you meet some very good Christians who tell you that their belief is that the Christ is the Son of God? This is what they've been believed since their birth, since all their generations. So one should not argue with them or just keep quiet, or because I am right now in the United States and I do meet people, and I just don't know whether I should say something or I'm confused.
So you see, it all depends on the situation, the scenario, the state of your discussee. Because you see, people have different dispositions. At times, when you discuss sensitive topics, they flare up. At times, they are very congenial. So you have to pick and choose your audience. So if your audience is receptive, you can very humbly say that we have a difference of opinion in this regard, and that is that we regard Jesus to be a prophet and a human being who is not the son of God. You can, and of course, this is not something which they do not know. They already know this, that Islam has this difference. So if they ask for the stance of Islam, I hardly would foresee that this question would ever arise because of the fact that they already know that Muslims don't believe so. So I would think that instead of discussing the divinity of Jesus, this is a point of contention. We know we have to discuss other things, and there are so many other things that we can discuss. For example, the fact that we are born of a common parent, and since these parents are common, we have these basic human values which are common to all of us. And the other thing which I always encourage Muslims when they are living in a society where they often interact with non-Muslims is that they should have regular, if possible, Bible and Quran reading sessions. Maybe once a month they can sit together and read passages from the Quran, read passages from the Bible. The purpose is not to convince other people, but the purpose is that they should get educated. So I always say that educate, do not dominate. So instead of dominating the other person, instead of trying to convince the other person that he is wrong, let's educate ourselves. And the best way to educate ourselves is to sit together, read our holy books together in a session, maybe compare them. So, in a way that we are able to understand what people say. So, it's not like making people follow what we believe, it's like making people understand what we believe. So, the rest of the thing is their own choice. Whether they would like to change their understanding is something which is left to their choice. This is the choice which the Almighty has given every person. So joint Bible Quran study sessions is a suggestion which I always give, that if possible, that is one area that you can come together, you can socially and interact religiously as well, and at the same time get educated vis-a-vis how they or we view these things.
I met a Pakistani lady yesterday who belongs to an interfaith group, and she said that one of the Christians said that some of them they consider Jesus Christ as a favorite uh, son of God, like we are all children of God. So they said it's not necessarily meaning that he's the son of God, but like he's the favorite son. So that's
So whether
possible
he
too.
so whether he's the son of God or whether he's the normal son of God. As I said, that is something that we do not subscribe to. We do not subscribe to any anthropomorphous manifestation of the Almighty in which He has any. You see, the Quran is very, very clear. It says that He is from no one, and no one is from Him. Lam yalid walam yulad. He doesn't have a father. He doesn't have a son. Neither He was created, nor is anyone His creation, as far as some being is concerned. So our concept of Tawheed or monotheism is that He is the one and only. He is Ahad. Here is the reason. This is the point that we differ with Christians. But I said this is not something which has come up today. It has been there ever since. In the times of the Prophet, this difference had already arisen, and it's still there. So I would say I would recommend that instead of harping on these differences, it's much better to come closer to each other by understanding what each other says, and of course by socially interacting with one another as far as we can, and by, of course, trying to understand each other. And if there are misconceptions, because you see, there are so many misconceptions which Muslims have regarding Christianity and which Christians have regarding Islam. So I would say that this is how we should interact, that read each other's books, get educated, and regard these books to be our common heritage. So when I say each other, it's just a figure of speech. Otherwise, what I say is that these are the books of God. All of them are books of God. The only edge which the Quran has is that it is preserved in its original language. There has been no tampering with the Quran. Others are translations of the original works. So this is a common heritage. So let us treat this as a common heritage. Let us treat all the prophets of God as all equally respectable prophets of God. So once this change comes about among in Muslims first, because I find that many Muslims who are religious in nature, they are generally averse to Christians. So no, this is not the case. The more religious you become, the more closer you should go, or closer you should become towards other people of the world. So that's how I see things.
So maybe Dr. Shehzad, they just consider him as the most favorite prophet. I think one can just leave it to that. But thank you so much. Maybe that's what they're thinking, I'm guessing.
As I said, that could be the thinking, but again, this is just a marginal group that you have probably come across. Otherwise, the mainstream has a different view. It's not just a favorite son of God; it is the son of God that the mainstream thinks. And as I said, that whether they think that he's a favorite son of God or a son of God, that's besides the point. As I said, both are not acceptable to the Quran. And I think the best way that we should uh, finish this debate is just hand over the books of God to each other. Let God speak for Himself. These books of God, they are in these books, God speaks for Himself. So let God speak to them by reading these books. Instead of we telling them how God says or what God says, let God speak to them and let them read what God says. And if God cannot change them, we cannot.
Thank you very much.
Are there any other questions? Okay, I just see only one hand, and since there are no more questions, Shehzad sir, I think I have my own question here. You said that sacrificing an animal is actually symbolic representation. So why do we just stick to like cows and camel and goat or lamb? Why can we not sacrifice like chicken or turkey?
Because the word which the Quran has used are anam. Anam means four-legged beasts which have four legs. So it has referred to a specific category of animal sacrifice. And we know from ancient religions that chickens and other things of this sort were never sacrificed or never presented as sacrifice. Animal sacrifice, is an ancient ritual worship. It started right with Adam. Abel and Cain, their two sons. One of them was a farmer, and the other one had a herd of cattle or a herd of animals. So animal sacrifice was something which is always there. It just not start did not start with the prophet. So this animal sacrifice, the manner in which it was conducted was always done with four-legged beasts. And the word anam in the Quran actually stands for these beasts which have four legs, and that is like the Quran's telling us that the acceptable or the minimum acceptable or the type of animals which are acceptable are so and so.
Thank you, Shehzad sir. I have another question. Like, I'm from India, and then India is a democratic country, but these days, all the new changes in the laws are coming against Muslims, like, abolishment of triple talaq, and especially like, cow vigilantism that is like going on. So I'm scared that, during Eid, like many Muslims will be targeted. So what do you suggest? I mean, in this scenario, do you think? I mean, like many of the states in India, they have like considered it as illegal to actually like slaughter cows and stuff. But then lambs and goats are like super expensive when compared to cow. Like it's a general understanding there that in cow 7 people can take their share actually. So
Right.
I mean, what do we do in these circumstances?
So actually, you see that it is the responsibility of the state that if it's a secular state or a secular democracy, which India claims to be, then every religious denomination should have the right to practice their own religion. So we do not destroy temples in Pakistan, do we? We give them respect, although we are against idols, we are against things which are worshipped other than God, but we do not kill Hindus for that. So if we can tolerate these idols in temples in Pakistan or maybe in every Muslim country, this gives a message that we have to tolerate other people, the other religions. So if this intolerance is shown on one plane, it can be extended to other plane. People will start smashing statues and idols of deities of other religions. Should this be the norm? No, it should not. So I think the state institutions have to play this role. Our educational institutions have to play this role. They have to impart this attitude, this behavior to their students. They have to respect the other people's views in this regard. So if they are sacrificing a cow, so they are sacrificing it because they are not Hindus. So, for example, if I don't drink liquor, if I don't take alcohol, and if someone else takes alcohol, so for me, this is sufficient that he is a person who is following what he thinks is allowed to him, and I'm following what I think is allowed to me. So we should not think of other people. It's not other people that we worry about. It's basically our own. And I said that two state institutions. One is the educational institution, and other is a religious institution, which are the mosque and the mandir, both the temples, in which this teaching should be imparted. That as far as religion is concerned, you have to follow what you have been told, but don't force your views on others. Now, this is something which does not come easily. It has to become a culture, it has to become a practice, it has to become a tradition. It does take a lot of effort, it does take a lot of time. But as I said, it can only be done once all these institutions start working in tandem with one another.
Thank you so much, Shehzad sir. I guess there are no more questions, so I think we can just wrap up.
Okay. Wrap up, inshallah, and see you then next week.
Thank you so much, everyone, for joining. Inshallah, we will see you next week. Assalamu
Okay.
alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam and Khuda Hafiz.
Allah Hafiz.